Political correctness. And political correctness is the oppression of our intellectual movement, so no one says anything anymore in case somebody else gets offended.
Trigger warning, that's what we're calling it for now. And I've got Dr. Judy ready in the background. I think she's there. Are you there?
I'm here.
There she is.
Did you hear me? Oh, good. I wasn't sure if you could hear me or not.
I couldn't for a while because I had you turned down. I'm playing my excellent intro, but you can't hear it right now, so the audience is going to have to bear with us till it finishes.
I was having trouble with my headset, so I didn't know if it worked or not.
Well, I think, is it working? Can you hear?
Yeah, I hear you, and if you can hear me, then it's working.
Yay. Okay. Well, I do have a camera on me today. I'm taking a bold risk. It's the end of 2017, start of 2018 pretty soon, so I figure I may as well turn over a new leaf.
Will Stephen be here?
Stephen's not going to be here. He's that guy's a gadabout. But we're just about we're on air, but my intro hasn't finished yet.
Oh, okay.
It goes on and on, my friend. Okay, I think we're just coming up to the end now. I think I'm going to shorten that. I wish you could hear it. Okay.
Is it the one with Stephen in it?
Nope. This is brand new. This is a whole new thing. This is the trigger warning thing. It's got a little piece in it with a guy talking about political correctness. And now we're just kind of fading out. But it's a long fade out. There we go. We're done. Hey. Okay. You're not hearing what I'm hearing, but that was a really long intro, I have to say. Anyway, hi.
Hi. Did you get your trigger warning about talking with me?
Well, I think I could get a trigger warning anyway about anything. Doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
It's not a safe space. It's not safe.
Reality isn't. It actually is kind of scary to think, how padded people are getting, and how they think they need to be coddled.
I know. I totally agree with you. It's getting to be pretty scary out there, especially when the world is getting a little bit more precarious with all the news about North Korea and such. Have you heard about that?
Oh, I don't pay attention to that because I think that's just being a trigger warning. It's just getting people worked up.
Well, this is what the show's about, trigger warnings. Right,
but I think it's just about working people up, which is, I don't like to feed it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's what they do it for.
Mm-hmm.
Think of all the things going on in the world. Why does the news focus on particular things?
Well, in this case, I don't think the news is actually focusing on it. I think it's my own little band of strange people that talk about what's coming up in the new year. But people that have been listening to QAnon, I'll bet you haven't. You haven't heard about QAnon.
No. No, but what I'm thinking of, if they have old technology, it can be dustified if somebody
Mm-hmm.
wants to justify it. That is, if somebody wants to justify it. So it's going to be the way it is because somebody wants it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not by accident.
So you must. This is a great thing about you is that you don't listen to the news. You don't know what's going on in terms of the buzz. You know what's the latest buzz right now. QAnon is the big thing because it's clearly coming from within the White House. The information because there are pictures aboard. What do you call it? The plane. The plane. What do you call the plane? The President Trump's plane when he was going around the world. There were reports coming, and anyway, it's very cryptic, and some people might understand what I'm talking about, and some people might not.
It's another form of like As the World Turns or Young and the Restless, whatever the. It's just a show that people watch.
Mm-hmm.
A saga. What's really going on? Do you think anyone would clue us in?
Well, I'm not as cynical as you. You don't even think I can
Oh,
get on the air at the right time, so how can I
right,
convince you of anything?
right.
You're
But
usually right too.
do you think about it? If something is really up, do you think we're going to be informed about it? No.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do anything. The only help that they need on our part is to watch us panic because that allows them to do other things they want to do.
I totally agree with you, but I used to be pretty cynical about Trump and how he got into so-called power, but I do think there's a huge war going on between the crew and Trump and his
Oh,
gang.
yeah, they're trying to shape public opinion for sure. And whatever happens. It's sort of out of our hands. So that's why I don't like to fill up my brain cells with stories that it's basically speculation. Like you just know something's going on. Okay, right. So something's going on with somebody somewhere, and okay, and that's all that we really know.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
they like to drop various hints out to it's perception management.
okay, and so what? We won't talk about what's actually going on in that world. We'll talk about what's going on in
Well,
your world. With
Well,
what are
no,
your thoughts?
that if there's any chatter about North Korea doing nukes or whatever, we know that there's a technology that somebody has that can justify it.
Well,
You know,
what I'm saying
and
is
so
that
so so it's if they don't justify it, it's because they don't want to. They want it
I
to happen, whatever. So it's
I
out of
get
our
that.
hands,
I get that,
right?
but we're talking about the other way around. We're talking about the fact that there's a plan to actually do a first strike against North Korea, which he talked about 20 years ago. If you look at the interview that he did 20 years ago, that's what he said. You got to just get rid of the
Blow them
threat,
away.
you
Yeah,
know, just
yeah.
do it.
Then,
What do you think
then
about
then
that?
that's fine. Well, if
Yeah.
they do it, they do it. If they don't, there's not a lot of control we have over that.
It's a lot about just trusting who you got in power there. That's
Well,
a big.
whoever is in power is the one. Is in power is just the mascot there. We don't really know, but whoever is in control of the crew's in control of everything. That's by definition. That's what the crew is. Then they do whatever they do. The only thing that we can control is our perception,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I see it. I don't like to get it managed.
Right.
It's fun to look at different things, like is the at a lower level kind of, but it's indicative of how they're controlling public perception,
Mm-hmm.
and can they get away with it or not? I am specifically speaking of what is it, C-16?
Right. We're going back to C-16.
Yeah,
Let's.
and how it's getting interpreted and or not interpreted or reinterpreted, and just that whole game playing, and it's like trigger warning.
Mm-hmm.
It's and why do we have all this nonsense stuff that has nothing to do with reality? Is it realities become non-challenging, so they got to dig up some more challenges?
Well, I'd like to question your idea of reality, because the reality is this. And I think a lot of people haven't grasped that, so that they're back in
What's
this.
this? What's this and what's that?
This is the fact that there are people out there that are talking about a lot of different things like QAnon and various things. That's reality. That is reality,
Well,
that they're talking about that.
it's reality that people are talking about other things too, about how they didn't get everybody didn't go away with a first place prize from the Little League game.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on what you're looking at and what you have control over deciding on. I think it's important to look at things we do have control over, or things we could have control over,
So
or
that's,
could
you're
possibly
defining
influence
reality
control.
that way. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Right,
talk over you.
right. Rather than what the crew is up to, or maybe not up to, or talking about hinting at being up to. It's a whole spaghetti bowl of um, what do you call it? Hypotheses and speculations.
Do you think there's something in humans that enjoys that? Because it's pretty universal. I know that it's not your way, but from what you've seen, from what
Right.
you've
Yeah.
experienced.
People like to speculate, and they want the answer, and so they grab onto speculation, decide that's the answer, and move on, quit questioning it, including and it's gotten much worse in recent years. Just in the past few years, it's that people can't just hold off, like tell themselves, I don't know the answer, let me take in the data until I do. Very few people can do that now. I think more people used to be able to. They'd realize that they didn't have all the answers, and they would just collect information as they heard it or found it or whatnot. I was speaking of like the 1940s or 30s or 50s, and they didn't have to have an answer right now.
Where do you get your
And now
data? You're talking about the
it's
data, but
different. Right. It's different ways, and you don't know how reliable it is or isn't, and so that's why you don't jump to an answer. I'm talking about like the 1940s or whatnot. So you say, well, this is like the general consensus, but it could be this. It could be if people weren't, gung ho on top of any one thing in particular. They kind of knew this was the social norm over here, and people kind of, they were, from what I understand, like 80% behind it, but like everybody had their reservations of what really is absolute fact. And until recent years, that's kind of how things were. But now it's that I'm speaking gross generalities, but now it's like whatever the answer is, boom, 100% sure, boom, move on. They don't sit and think. Maybe it comes from not reading so much, because when you read a book, you have to um, incorporate that stuff and contemplate the ramifications of all the things, and they have to kind of work together. If you start finding holes in the story, then and I don't quite, you start questioning it. And
mm-hmm.
so you used to think about things more, and I think now people think about things less and less and less. They just want the answer. Look on Wikipedia, that's the answer. Okay, that's fact, 100% sure, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
There's very less contemplating things.
Yeah, I'm totally understanding what you're saying. I'm just wondering, okay, this is a question outside of all of that. Where do we get our data? How do we get involved? How do we get it?
Well, there's different forms of data, and you can pick it up in different ways, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some things you can't be 100% sure of what the answer is. Like if somebody's having a conversation in a lead-lined meat locker, there's very little chance you're going to know what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So why speculate on it?
Okay, so
And you just know that they're, you saw these people walk in there, and somebody's in there chatting. You don't know what they're chatting about, but then you see other things, and you develop sort of an understanding too of how things go. Like, for example, if somebody is, two people are talking, and one person is blaming the other one for something, it's probably what they themselves are doing. Because if you blame the other guy first, then you're not suspected of it.
mm-hmm.
That's another thing that you start learning with time, that if, because why else would somebody be, just reaching out and blaming?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's things you can pick up that way that aren't necessarily on the front page of the newspaper. And you start seeing things, think, okay, this person's unreliable. If somebody's unreliable, I tune them out. Um, you know how the body deals with a foreign object in it or dead tissue. It kind of encapsulates it and makes it not part of the body. It just isolates it.
So you're
And so
talking about
that's what I.
you're talking about not speculating and not trusting certain things, but how do you know what to trust?
That's what life is all about, figuring out what is or isn't reliable. That's why, for me, that and also my students, if you find some data that doesn't, that's bogus, you have to throw out all the data in that data set. You can't pick and choose because then you don't have unbiased data.
Okay, now what if you find one thing that is true and it's affirming your
Well, you
thesis,
have
your
to. You
hypothesis?
have to. If you find one thing's true amongst a bunch of false stuff, you can't
No, no,
rely on.
no. Okay, so we're just starting off. We've got an hypothesis and we're just working on it. Now we've got one thing that's
Well,
true.
that's the problem
Okay.
with starting out with the hypothesis.
No, well, okay, but that isn't.
You have to
Okay,
start building from somewhere. You start says okay, something's up.
right. But
Okay,
when
what's it that something up? You don't start with the answer and then see if you can
okay,
support the
just
answer.
just hang on. Roll back because that's not what I'm
Okay,
talking about. Roll back. Okay, I'm just talking about I have an idea. I'm going, I wonder how that light bulb works. And, I got an idea because I can see there's a wire running up the lamp up to the, thing. So I can see
so
evidence
what is your objective? Is it because you want to build another light bulb or
because I'm
uh,
nosy. It's because I want to know how things work. I'm just nosy.
okay? So you want to know how the light bulb works, so then you
Yeah.
you check it out.
Right. So my, I'm just give me just
And,
give me a
based
second. I could
based
be
on
totally wrong. I could
yeah
be
based
totally
on
wrong.
other
But
yeah
let
based
me
on
just tell you what I
uh,
would do, not as
based on other understandings of reality, I suggest you don't start out putting one finger in one part and one finger in another part to figure out how it works. So that you don't get a second chance at relearning that.
no, but I think okay. I think we're talking about two different things. I'm trying to interpret for the audience. I'm trying to create a little bridge here between how your thinking goes and how the other extreme goes. So if we can find something that helps people to kind of bridge that gap, that would be great. So I'm just using this as an illustration because say just for sake of argument, I just want to know how that thing works. And so that's my hypothesis. I'll call it that for lack of any other word. I think that wire goes somewhere and it creates light. So I'm starting off with that idea. How else could you do something? You have to start off with some sort of a question, don't you?
Well, it depends on what your objective is. If it's like something that you have, um, you can't put your hands on. And you don't have much data on. That's a different thing. But it's if you want to, like for example, figuring out how the light works, you start looking at, okay, this thing puts out light. You
Mm-hmm.
start just observing what this does. I make the switch go, it turns it on and off. There's a wire that goes from the light switch to the thing. And if I cut that wire, okay, the light doesn't work anymore. You have to start out with some observations before you can, go much beyond that. You don't start out with, Russian roulette kind of with just a random question. You have to have some indications of where you might be looking or going to. Like, okay, you have a light switch and it's connected with a wire to that light bulb up there, and you make the switch go and the light goes. Now, why does it do that? Or you have a dimmer switch. How does that work? You have to start out with some kind of um, uh, issue that you're working on, that you're
Right.
you're building from there.
So my
Like
issue is
you come upon a dead body. Okay,
yeah.
it isn't like you're going to imagine. Okay, what happens if I find a dead body? No, is the body dead or not? And okay, let's start collecting data on it instead of you know. just random out of the blue imagining a dead body.
Well, I was just going to say, okay, that's the word right there. I think that's the tricky one for people because I imagine things. I That's my whole brain is imagining and thinking about things because I'm a writer and I
Hmm.
produce plays and I make films. So I kind of have to see the whole thing done
Okay,
and that's how my
okay.
brain goes. Okay.
We can go from that point and say we come upon this dead body, and so okay, was it shot? So you have the question. I don't see bullet holes in it. Is it, you look for other piece of evidence, you know, and you build your case from there. And like, okay, let's get an autopsy and look at all the organ failures and see if they drank some poison or um, whatever the case is. That usually gives you lots more data to rely on. But they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
But theorizing that they might have been shot to death and going from there without checking for bullet holes in it. That's the kind of thing I'm saying that you need to kind of narrow it down a little bit instead of just randomly. Okay, let's hypothesize it has a bullet hole in it. Now, if it has a bullet hole in it, then this person could have shot him and that person could have shot him. That's what I talk about, just blank hypothesizing. You first got to figure out if it was shot to death.
Right.
Before you want to go, there's a decision tree kind of thing.
Okay.
Otherwise, you come up with this story that you get so locked into that you have trouble seeing out of it. Let's say you see a gun there, you forget to check for bullet holes in the body, but you see a gun, and then who owns the gun, and then you want to go arrest that person and try him, for murder before you even check see if there's a bullet hole in the body.
Okay.
And it turns out that it doesn't have a bullet hole in the body, so that guy's off the hook. Turns out that guy poisoned him. Well, he's off the hook now.
So at the beginning of that process, because you're kind of jumping in at the point where we have a dead body, I guess what I would have to say that there's another step there where we go, are we qualified or are we interested in dealing with this, or do we want to delegate it to somebody else? Because there's a lot of things in life that just are too much. We don't want to have to deal with that. So we go, somebody else
I see
is going to
exactly
deal
what
with
you're
that.
talking about. Here's my analogy with that. Assuming we're working with a dead body, that okay, I'm not qualified to do a full autopsy, and a big panel on what toxins it might be in the body. So I delegate that to the pathologist and a coroner or whatever, and then but I have to trust his judgment. And then as I look at the report, wait a minute, the guy had blue fingernails. That doesn't match the report, whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
And but it does get tricky when you're having to rely on somebody else. But you need to have something that boosts your confidence in that person's trustworthiness.
Okay, that's a pretty key idea.
Yep, yep.
Key idea one.
And if somebody gets too much trust given to them, human nature, I think, is that they run wild with it and they become less accountable. So that becomes another issue.
Okay, accountability. So trust and accountability. Okay. That's what it does come down to in so many of these things. It's an interpersonal, relational thing that we're talking about. As far
Yeah,
as
we
how
won't
we
mention
interact.
the particular people. Well, maybe we can. There's a certain 9/11, JFK, whatever, all around, snooper into these things, who immediately, as soon as something happens, is the first one to say, false flag, nobody died at Sandy Hook, nobody died in Las Vegas, nobody died in Charleston church shooting. They immediately say that, and then it turns out that can be disproved. People still keep believing whatever they say on the next event. And that's why, there's no accountability. And accountability, keeps things a lot cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably heard of people who forecasted that in 2012, the world was going to shut down or end or something.
Apparently. About
And,
this
and the
time.
people,
Yeah.
right, the people who were forecasting it afterwards, why they still believed?
Well, they have their reasons, and I won't go into it, but I do know some people that were basically saying, well, we didn't say that the world was going to end. We just said that the calendar ends at that point. But
Right,
so they revised. They
yeah,
have
it
to
was presented
revise.
that way. But that's my point. If we had accountability, As soon as somebody is caught with their foot in their mouth, whatever, and you put them aside, that leaves room for accountable people to come up.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's no accountability, you don't get there.
True enough.
And
Right.
and maybe that's what it comes down to. And as far as what the network media or whatever, why I don't have a TV is because they lost all accountability with me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
and as we can have seen even more recently, there's definitely a lack of accountability.
Well, I think this is what it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, or what I was talking about, because there are people on the internet that have certain skills. They're not just a bunch of bohunks. There can be a lot of people that they're talking
Hmm.
out of the top of their head, but there are those people who are, in our analogy, are like the coroner, who have the skills to be able to look at that dead body and to help the rest of us
Right.
understand.
If you need that dead body looked at, then with the coroner, then fine. But if you don't need it looked at, then you still don't need their services.
Mm-hmm. In the case of
And so,
9/11, we definitely needed a coroner, and you were that person. Or,
right. And my big phrase is to know what it is that you know that you know that you know,
mm-hmm.
and know that everything else you don't know. And so I don't like to delve into things that I don't know a whole lot about, nor do I like to completely trust somebody
Mm-hmm.
blindly. But what do I have, that I am in control of? What do I have that I need to trust somebody on? And then
Right.
how to negotiate those things around me. And things that I don't have any control of, that I'm not directly, connected with, uh, it's sort of like it spends energy. There's
Mm-hmm.
other people, I'm leaving it up to them to deal with other things. But as I've seen such a huge breakdown in all of our institutions, establishments,
Mm-hmm.
the scheme of things, it's accountability, it seems to have gone by the wayside.
Right. Well,
And
there
so
seemed.
it's
Sorry.
so to know, I like to know what it is that I know that I know. And then I don't like to get that clouded up with things I don't really know, and then I'm having to just believe.
Mm-hmm.
Unless some reason I need to know it, and then I'll delve into trying to figure that much out. Like this thing about North Korea. Yeah, I know there's noise about it, but it's not something that I have control over.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how much we whine, it's not going to affect it.
How much do you need to
Whatever they're
know?
doing.
If it's going to impact you literally, or the city that you live in, how much? Or it's like, okay, let's take a tornado that's a little bit more close
Okay,
to
yeah,
home.
tornadoes affect, but if somebody's going to bomb this place and I have no control of it, it's going to go for quite some distance. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember something my mom used to say, living in the D.C. area, they live right next to a Nike site. And that's where they have these underground missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And they take them out every once in a while to polish them up and, try them out. And she said she was glad that she lived there because she wouldn't have to worry about surviving the aftermath.
Right. It's yeah. It's
About being maimed. So I kind of use that attitude. I can't control it. Why worry about it?
Yep.
And worry about the things you do have control over. Maybe at other levels, like this thing I've been interested in more lately. That there is somewhat uh, worth thinking about, and as far as our culture goes, with this like C-16 business and the implications of that.
Can
And
you
if people,
please go over that with the audience just for a second? Just to
I
briefly
don't know the
explain it.
exact rule.
Well,
You probably can explain it better because it's a Canadian rule, but I think it could easily take over into the U.S.
it's
And
a freedom of expression and speech issue, because basically what it's saying is that if we don't use the right pronoun for people who are transgendered, then we are at risk of being prosecuted on that basis. That's sort of the
right, and
short
it's
point.
it's not for saying something that somebody didn't like. It's for not saying something that somebody wants you to say. That's where the division gets drawn. And then think of the psychology of being required to say something you don't necessarily agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty soon you incorporate it. It's a form of brainwashing.
Well, it is already. The fact,
Yeah.
okay, I would say that even if you mispronoun people or whatever the word is, that already is impinged on my freedom of speech, because it's not about, I don't even have to know you. You could. I couldn't know that you want to be called they or whatever it is. But if I accidentally call you
Let's say
a
let's say
girl
you,
and you're a
yeah, let's say you
boy,
obviously have boobs and feminine looking face and long hair and all, and somebody says, "Ma'am, could you go after him because you want to be called sir?"
yes,
It's that to that extent. It's really disruptive
disruptive,
to the culture.
insidious. It's
Destructive.
downright evil as far as I'm
Yep.
concerned, because anytime that we pit people against each other, particularly when there's no ill intent, it's just a way of conversing and trying to be in community with one another. It's another way of dividing us.
Yeah, like I said, I've seen people come up, a store person or whatever, come up behind me and say, "Sir," and then I turn around, they go, "Oh, I'm sorry," and they turn bright red in the face. "Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
ma'am. Sorry, ma'am." They're more harmed than I am. It was an innocent mistake. It isn't any form of respect either. It's just an identifier. I think Chinese don't make a distinction, because when they try to learn English, they everything's he.
Wow. And
They
there's
don't
so
do
many
he or she.
Chinese people that live in Canada. Can you imagine the implications for this culturally? That's another
Oh yeah.
thing I hadn't thought about, because what if religion or culture or whatever comes into it, and you say, well, in our religion, this is how it works. In our culture, this is how it works. Then you have a whole soup of
Right. I think
rights.
they learned she, but they didn't realize the distinction between he and she. They they're referring to my office mate, who's a guy, and might refer to it as she, just not meaning anything by it, but just because that's they don't know the language.
Mm-hmm.
And if they care about people and once they know the language, they might feel embarrassed to they would feel embarrassed more than the person being referred to would feel harmed.
Mm-hmm.
Like the store person coming up and saying, "Sir," and you turn around, and, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, I'm sorry, I apologize." They're the ones who are more bothered by it. They feel embarrassed and on the spot
Mm-hmm.
as they got it wrong. But
Right.
it's just a way of referring to people. It has nothing to do with respect, disrespect. But to be told that you have to use certain speech um, and incorporate that, it's a form of brainwashing.
Mm-hmm. See,
And I choose to think about those things rather than things I can't control. Is I think more people need to think about the implications rather than listening to the sales pitch from whoever wants to pass the law.
I think it's quite interesting because my brain always goes to the big picture. I think in that way we're quite different. I am probably the polar opposite of you. I take in everything, and I see these pictures and I see North Korea and this issue as being very much the same thing, because it's this idea of trying to control one another and not just letting people have the freedom to have their own country, live and live
Right.
in
Right,
peace.
right. But
We
see,
have
we're
to
seeing
control.
it still. We're seeing it differently. What I'm seeing that as is a form of mind control, the storytelling. We have no control over what somebody else is doing.
I see it as the
And
same thing overall. That it's all mind. It's all mind control. It's whether it's
right,
C-16 or whether it's North Korea. I see
the
this
this the
pattern.
story. No, the story of North Korea could be a psyop. That's what I'm stating. It
Okay,
for all
let's.
we know.
I'm just saying if that is actually true. I mean, there was a time when
So
people actually
we
fought
can't
for their
right
country. My
we
my
can't
dad
right.
was in
Right.
he was fighting against North Korea in the 50s. So there was a point where people had to put their money where their mouth is. And what I'm saying is that all of this, whether it's wars or rumors of wars, has to do with not allowing
let's back up
other
to what I said
people
earlier.
to live.
Joni, let's back up to what I originally said. I said if there's a problem with a nuke in North Korea and somebody in this country does not like that, they can dustify it. They have the technology to deal with it if they want to deal with it.
I'm
And if they
talking
don't
about
want to deal with it, there's nothing we can do about it.
I'm talking about philosophically. I'm talking about philosophically the fact that we're all human, and the problem with all humans is that they're trying to control one another. That's what I'm saying is the same.
Exactly. We agree there. And I'm saying these stories about and getting people riled up about nukes and all is a way of controlling us. And that's what I refuse to be controlled with.
Right. Just like me with C-16, it's the same thing. Or Jordan Peterson, they just say, no, I'm
not going to do it.
The problem is so few people will actually do that.
Yeah. The reason why I don't, get worked up about the North Korea thing is, as far as I know, it's a story we're given. But if it's true and they're about to do something, the U.S. if they want to stop them, they can justify it. So I know they have the technology to deal with it if they want to deal with it. So at that point, I don't have any more control over it than that. What I do have control over is whether or not I let it psychologically control me.
Right. Well, you of all people know this. I mean, you know this more than most people because you've seen what happened on 9/11, and a lot of people haven't. They don't get it.
But also, I've seen the effect of it afterwards, and how easily people are were psychologically controlled by that event too. And that's why I refuse to be psychologically controlled by as much as I can control it by this other event, realizing that I can't do anything about it myself. And if the people running the show, in the U.S., if they want to stop it, they can. They have the technology to stop it. So whether or not they choose to do that or not is not something I have control over.
Right.
And so that's why I go to other things now. The C-16 business is something that we have more control over. If more people spoke out against it, okay, they're saying that there's an endpoint about how much we can legislate people's speech. And like not gonna do it, if we, join up with that, because that's at another level that we sort of have control over. But you guys didn't get a whole lot of control, but they just passed it anyway, whether or not you wanted it passed.
Yeah, sort of like when Trudeau gave away $20 million to the Clinton Foundation, or when he took his holidays and then traded off, for favors. It's happening so much, and people are just
accountability
so oblivious.
is an issue.
Yeah, it just
but the thing that we can affect is other people that we run into or encounter or listen to the show who think that C-16 is a good idea because it's nice to be respectful to people who are transgender and because they've been killing themselves and whatnot. They bought into the sales pitch, not realizing the implications of it and helping people to open their eyes wider. Because whenever they sell something like the Patriot Act, doesn't that sound good? Healthcare and destroy self. Yep. And you have all these insecure terms like homeland insecurity, right? And so they're very good at marketing. I wonder how many marketing majors there are that graduate each year. There's lots of them. Why do you need so many marketing people? It's how to get people conned into believing something they really don't believe in. And so that's why I don't like to fill my head with so much stuff. I do listen to some stuff, like before the election, enough to know that they're doing this funny smear job on Trump. And so, having been there myself, like, okay, what's up with that? I assume that they have control over the balloting, but they need people to believe in the outcome. But I figure they could control it however they want it to be controlled. But why it turned out, who knows why it turned out the way it did. But for instance, the Roy Moore thing, I forget the exact numbers, but it's something like 80% of the vote is Republican. And if that's the way it goes, they can't very well jimmy the numbers and have Roy Moore lose without reason. So they had to make it believable that people wouldn't vote for him. That's what I think it was about. Not that affected people's vote, but that it left a reason for people to believe in the numbers that they gave.
So bring in the sex scandal. Bring on the
Right.
sex scandal.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really strange how that game works. But if you sit back and don't take it personally, not believing all the exact details they're giving, but look at the general overall effects that are going on with the various stories, they control people's thinking. Not so much the actual events, but the stories that are presented.
Right.
We don't hear. Speaking of which, we don't hear any more Roy Moore stuff anymore. It's just gone.
Oh, I actually just posted something on my site.
Oh.
But by the way, you can go to characterdriven.com. I'm always posting stuff there. Yeah, they've actually got some sort of evidence. They've
About
put
the vote
forward
rigging?
a legal challenge, and they just did that the other day. So that's all going to come down the pike. Now,
one thing that's always bothered me about this business is, absentee ballots and military ballots never get counted. If it's a close thing, and like with the Gore thing or with this, wouldn't you think those would matter? But they don't. They still want to stop it before they have to count those ballots. So it's like, why vote?
I thought those got got counted first before the actual vote.
No, they had commented that the military ballots hadn't been counted.
Well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, and that was the case also with the Gore thing in 2000, that it never got into counting those.
So now my question is, do you think that there are a lot of things not unlike 9/11 that they're coming to the fore where people are actually trying to pull back the mask and they're trying to reveal what actually happened in a lot of these cases, whether it's Roy Moore, 9/11, the spy ring in Congress?
Well, see, even the Roy Moore thing is just, that's the stories we're given, but that's why I only think about it on the surface. But then how much do people really know that they know, or is it just they're just one step back from the psyops? They're half psyoped.
Okay, so what if, just for sake of argument, we won't talk about any particular subject, but what if there is somebody like the coroner who knows what they know and it's been suppressed for whatever reason and their report is not being put out as it was created by that person?
I guess it depends on their credibility.
Say it's you. Say it's you talking about 9/11. And
that's that's one thing, but some people are brainwashed into thinking I'm not credible.
No, I know,
so
I understand that, but
you
know what you know. So the reality is that you're an engineer, you're a person that understands the dynamics here, and you know what you know.
I have a book that nobody can refute.
Right. So say the coroner's report could not be refuted if it was actually put out in its entirety and not done.
And if you had 5 people who independently observed the body and they saved the tissues so that other people could judge it, they didn't incinerate the body right afterwards.
Well, okay, putting it up next to your research, okay, so same parameters, because it wouldn't matter if other people agreed with you or not. You know what you know. And it is what it is. Doesn't matter what other people say. So here you've got another person.
Also other people who read my book, you can't refute it. Nobody's been able to refute it.
Right. So here you've got the coroner, and he's detected a drug in the body, and somehow it's been taken out of the report, just like people do with your book. They take certain things out, or they turn it into a nukes or
Or they
something.
add things in, like if somebody adds in about a bullet hole that wasn't there, and
Right.
they put in a bullet hole.
So that's what
When
I'm
they when
trying to
they
do, is draw an analogy that there are people
okay.
like yourself who are in other fields who have a passionate need to get the word out that this is what really
But
happened.
it gets difficult though is let's draw on that same analogy my
Mm-hmm.
work versus the Richard Gage's club. That they really haven't done any research or evidence. They just have a story they're pushing.
Right, and
And
we've talked about that, but what we haven't
right,
talked
right,
about.
but what people, the average person believes that those people, that the Richard Gage's group have really heavily researched it. That's what they believe. So
Right.
they think that there's two conflicting research reports.
Yet there are people like me, and people that have read your book who have, how many around the world that kind of go, oh, I didn't know any of this before I read the book, and they absolutely believe it. So I'm talking about those people that are listening to somebody who the coroner who can't get their word out, and there is a small group of people that are saying, I believe this guy because he's got the right evidence. So I'm just saying there are
Right,
people in other
right,
walks of life right now.
I guess what I'm pointing out is that
Mm-hmm.
how does the average person know if it's Richard Gage? Like people think that Richard Gage has really done some
Because we're
horrendous
smart.
research and
Because we're smart. And when you give a certain analogy like the billiard ball, I'm smart enough to figure it out. I don't have to be an engineer. I look at it and go, oh, well, Richard Gage is he's not credible, and it's only because I've had the
because
evidence provided for
you've been
me.
able to, right, because you've been able to look at some of the evidence, and that's what's needed for the credibility test, is for people to be able to have something to and also to care about the truth.
Exactly.
So many other people say, well, there's something fishy with it. So, well, there's more people in Richard Gage's club, and Dr. Wood doesn't have a club. So, therefore, I'm going to go with Richard Gage.
Well,
And they just get into
I'll
believing
use
it.
another example because oh, oops, what happened there? Not sure. Um, I interviewed a guy, Dr. Johansson. Sorry, I'm just doing something here. Okay. I oh okay. I interviewed a guy named Dole Johansson, and he'd done all this research about. For some reason, I'm losing the sound. I don't know why, but something weird. Anyway, so I interviewed him. He'd been working on this for 40 years, and it was really important information about the cell phone technology that was out there, and it was all suppressed by the cell phone corporation. Same exact thing that happened to you. And he just kept on working and working and saying it may take 2 generations. All right. We'll see if people are still there. I'm not monitoring the chat today. I'm trying to do too many different things, so I haven't got that open. But I do apologize. That was a little power issue that I was dealing with. So we were talking about the analogy, and I was trying to get it out because, oh, just a sec. I have to plug something in. Otherwise, you won't hear Dr. Judy. I'm sorry. There's always got to be some little technical difficulty. Okay, let's try this. Okay, are you still there, Dr. Judy? Can you hear me? Oh, let's see. Mm-hmm. Okay, are you there? can't hear. You're there, right?
I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just plugged this in again and I can't. I'm going to try this. Okay, talk again? Might have to restart the stream. Okay, I think I have to restart the stream. I hope you guys will bear with us. We're going to be just doing this for another few minutes anyway, because it's a holiday and there's other things that are pressing in today. But I'm going to start this again, so please bear with me. I'm going to stop now. So I'm just going to go back on the air. And I think we are on the air again. And hopefully we haven't lost the whole audience. But in any case, we're recording this, so we'll put it up on YouTube for people to listen to. Now, okay, so when last heard, I just want to quickly say I interviewed Ole Johansson, who was the guy that was doing research into cell phone use about 40 years ago. And all of the research was suppressed by the cell phone companies. And so he's basically saying, I hope somebody else finds this out, because I haven't been able to break through to where people are getting the truth. Okay, I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that's an excellent analogy or example, or also the cigarette industry, too, that was suppressing data and packaging it and psyoping people and what it said. that tends to be a problem, and so those with the bucks, what was it that Matt Lauer was getting, something like $25 million a year at that price? You bet. Yeah, 25, 26. I've heard two different numbers, but it's in the ballpark. At that price, you know that he'll say whatever they're telling him to say, because they're paying him to say it.
Pretty much.
And so how can that be, truthful? And whoever has the big, the deepest pockets is the one that wins this game, the information war game. And so realizing that, you realize that you're not going to get truth out on network media, because somebody else it'll pay them to shut it down. Mm-hmm. And so that is a real problem. But I think the biggest thing to learn from that is, again, what can we control, is to take stuff sort of with a grain of salt until we have more understanding, and not to let your brain get because first impressions stick. So it's hard to unlearn something. Like, for instance, even this thing I saw you had on your page, something about the dossier thing the poop sheet on Trump. It was trumped up. But people, first impression sticks, so people believe it's true because that's what they were told. And then, later it comes out that it was fabricated by this person, that person, this person paid that person bucks to, and you can almost bet, well, you can bet on it, that's the kind of way things go. So that's why you take things with a grain of salt until you have more understanding of it, that it's more in control. Yeah, like with the Roy Moore stuff that comes out. All right, who's orchestrating whatever to make noise? What's the real thing that you have an understanding of what's going on? And it's getting trickier and trickier. And it used to be, I'm thinking of like Little House on the Prairie era, almost 200 years ago, 150 years ago, that you knew everybody in your town and who the liars were, and to take whatever they say with a grain of salt. We don't have that luxury, right? Or Green Acres was Mr. Haney. Yeah, he was always going to pull some deal.
A huckster. I think he would be called a huckster.
Yeah, the snake oil salesman type. Right. And the people would get to know who those people are and learn to take them with a grain of salt, because that's what they themselves observed. They didn't need to be taught that. They just observed that those people are a little bit, weird. But now we've been kept so busy that we have to rely on hearsay from somewhere, and that's what it gets so easy to manage us, and to realize that in a big way. Mm-hmm. And so from that point, you start realizing, you got to control what you can control, instead of worrying about things you can't control.
There's a
And
person who asks us, they say, stuff is going down. How much will we ever be told or actually be told?
yeah, very, very little. Um, and that's why how can we set up a totally different communication system? But then that'll get corrupted too. Because, what power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is that what the phrase is?
Very well done, yeah.
So that's, the network media is that way for sure. And the internet, of course, is that way too. People think the internet is all like, surprisingly, my brother thought that Wikipedia was all open, so therefore, if there's an error, somebody will correct it. Not realizing that Wikipedia is controlled.
Right.
There are people who are blacklisted.
Like Snopes. Snopes is another way of controlling people. I love that one.
Yeah, and as long as people believe that it's open and honest, it works. It can control.
Mm-hmm.
And to realize that is anything that's open and honest is going to get corrupted. So the only thing you yourself can control is your own thinking, and then people in whom you have trust or evidence. I used to have a poster in my lab that said, "In God we trust. All others must bring evidence."
Yeah.
People
trust in God a lot less than they trust in things like Wikipedia and Snopes.
Exactly, and this, that's what I really want to emphasize, and that's what I'm saying about the network stuff. Yeah, maybe there is something going on with North Korea. Maybe it's all a story they're giving us. We have no way of sorting that out, and we don't have a big way of controlling that. And if we can work on controlling things that we can control, like, figuring out how to clean up media or clean up, you can't really clean up government, but, things that we can hold people accountable for. I think that's where it starts. And the biggest thing that would change the world is if everyone was honest.
This is true.
If everyone told the truth, and if somebody ended up lying, people would then, scorn them.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's acceptable for people to lie.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess people have always lied. It's just that now they're a little bit more overt about it. They're not trying to cover it up. It used to be that it was a shame to lie. Now people talk about it being just one of those things you have to do. Yeah, you have to. Yeah. Well,
why?
Well, okay. I'll give you an example. Somebody said to me the other day, they said, well, you can't go through life without lying because, there's those little white lies because somebody will say, oh, do you think I'm fat? And I'll say, if somebody says that to me, then I'll have to tell them.
You don't want me to.
I'll usually ask them, why do you want me to tell you if you're fat? You know if you're fat or not. I mean, if you feel like you're fat, then go ahead. What are you trying to do? What do you want me to say to you? Because whatever you want me to say, I'll say, but I won't necessarily mean it. If what are you trying to get at here? And so if you have those kind of people in your life, I would say you better start being honest with them and just say, don't ask me questions like that. They're meaningless. It's all.
And my favorite one, in the grocery store line or whatever, they say, "How are you today?" And I said, "Too soon to tell." That's my program response. And I haven't sat and evaluated how I'm doing today. I mean, I'm busy living life. I'm not sitting, putting judgment on it was a good day or a bad day or I just. So when they say, "How are you doing?" because they don't mean anything by it. So I say, "Well, it's too soon to tell."
That's good.
And because I don't like to do fictitious answers.
Okay, so here's my New Year's challenge to all of our faithful listeners and the people that
we're getting some good. We're actually ending up in a good spot here about telling the truth.
Absolutely. And this is something that I wanted to challenge people to, including myself. And I have to say, okay, I did something the other day where I thought, okay, I'm at my friend's house and I was looking through some things and I thought, they don't need this cord. And they really wouldn't. They wouldn't have missed it. And I put it aside and I didn't take it at that point, but I put it aside and I was just going to take it. And I was looking at it and I was going, no, I need to ask for that. even if they wouldn't miss it or they don't even know it's in there because I found it in the back of a cupboard. And I said to them, can I use this cord? Do you mind if I take this cord? And it was a very small thing, but those are the things that are insidious. You know what I mean? That's where it stards when we're
and
totally
maybe
honest
later
with
on
ourselves.
the person may have been looking for the cord, and then wondered where on earth it was, and start having to take the whole room apart looking for it because they knew they had that cord in there somewhere. But at least telling them, they went, oh, now I remember what happened to the cord. They
Exactly.
don't have to go and bring out a search party for it.
And I look at what my motivations were at that moment. This is something that I'm trying to do with myself, is to say, what was the reason I did that? I was afraid that she'd say no because I needed the cord. And it's manipulative. If that's our reason, there's always a reason behind lying. We're protecting ourselves or we want something, and it's not honoring to the other person, no matter what the reason is.
Or to our society in general. It ripples through the system.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
Because it becomes a habit. It's kind of like being required to say the wrong language is sort of brainwashing. It becomes a habit.
Or being
And
required to say a different pronoun than you
right,
prefer to say.
right. It ripples through the system, has a psychological effect. And I think that's the most important thing about always telling the truth. And if somebody does, after you're blunt with your answers to them, they'll learn not to ask you, does this dress make me look fat?
That's pretty much, that's how I've become unpopular with people, because I tend to be quite, I won't say,
Blunt.
I'm not going to say blunt because that's not nice. That doesn't make me sound like a nice person, but okay, it's blunt. My mom was blunt
And
too.
why does that mean you're not a nice person?
We're supposed to
Bluntness.
be supposed to say
Well, you're
nice
not
things
beating
to
around the
people.
bush, so there's no guesswork needed to know where you're coming from.
Oh, you always know where I'm coming from. That's one thing. And, I find that the people that I argue with sometimes, I try not to argue too much, but those are the really good friends, because they're not just paying you lip service. They're actually speaking the truth, and you might have a difference of opinion, but can you work through that? Can you get to where you
You
still
can see where
respect each
what
other?
issues is with them and what the issue is with yourself, and yeah, there's issues that to figure out about, and it's good that not everybody agrees with everything. That would be awful boring,
Mm-hmm. It would.
and you wouldn't learn anything.
And it all comes down to this. It's all about relationship, as far as I can see, because if we start respecting each other, then we will be honest. If we respect ourselves, we will be honest. I think it's hugely disrespectful to ourselves as well to try and convince ourselves that something is true and it's actually a lie, like taking cords that don't belong to us.
Yeah, and the people can like rewire their mentality so they somehow rationalize it that's okay. And then if everybody's doing that, what kind of a culture do you have?
Exactly. Well, that's what I basically said to this person. They said, so you go through life without lying. And I said, no, but when I do lie, I try to be honest with myself and then find out why and not do it again. That's the
It might eat
goal.
a hole in you.
It will eat a hole. I mean, that's how I am anyway. I,
I've got a quick story on this.
mhm.
That I was at a local convenience store getting some cookies, and they were something like $2.69. They rang it up as $2.49. And I said, "Oh, you charged me the wrong price for that." And she was trying to figure out how to undo it, and she needed help from the manager. And then the manager came over and says, "What are you doing questioning my employee? If you don't think my employees are honest, you shouldn't be shopping here."
Whoa.
And here I was pointing out that she was undercharging me.
He didn't know that at that point?
So like he didn't care or something. So I gave him the 20 cents difference, and I thought it was 1 penny tax on it, and I gave it to him. I said, "Okay, I'm out of here." That was the last time I was at that store.
That is crazy. And
Yeah,
that,
so if they give me back the wrong change or something, no matter, whose favor it is, I mean, I couldn't live with myself knowing I underpaid for something because I feel like I stole it.
mm-hmm, exactly.
So I'd bring it up to them, and the cashier doesn't care because she's just hourly wage person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it caused her a problem because she didn't know how to unring it and ring it up differently.
Mm-hmm.
She needed to figure that out. It's part of the thing. But it's weird that I can tell from when I've done that several times. Like one time I paid for a certain number of items at Lowe's, like 10 of these fence post things, and I got home and there was 11. So I went back to pay for the 11th one because they miscounted and I miscounted, but I definitely had 11 when I got home.
Mm-hmm.
And they appreciated that. They've gotten used to me. No, I'm kind of weird like that. And, and they can handle it. But the people who can't handle it, they assume that you are calling them a cheater.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just want to, we got to just figure out this was it's an agreement you're making when you're buying something for a certain price.
Right.
And you don't want to be cheating them or having them cheat you. But it's I don't know how we can change that. I wonder if this whole system has to blow up before it can. But we can still try to the importance of everyone being honest.
Well, what I do notice in this whole discussion is that, not the one we're having, but what you see online, is that people do want other people to be honest, and they're really excited about the idea that the truth is finally going to come to the fore. I guess my question is, how do we hold ourselves to that same standard? How can I make sure that I'm holding myself to a high standard before I weigh in on other people? And then it'll be the saying, well, I didn't steal as much as Hillary Clinton, and of course I feel that way, and I could never have done what she did, but it starts in such a small way, and we see
Yeah, and
ourselves
then
as
so
being
what is significant
better.
enough to? Yeah, you didn't steal as much, but you still did stole something. So when is it enough to consider it stealing?
Precisely. And that's how I feel about the pro-life situation too. Not that I'm going to get into that right here, but I just want to know, where does life start, if not at conception? And people can have their own ideas about that, but we cannot be honestly involved in a conversation until both of us have an opinion about
Or
where it starts. Okay.
have a whatever you call it,
Know
have
what
a
we know.
position.
Have a position.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I believe that I know what I know about that, and
And also
enough
what
to have
someone's
convinced
objective is.
myself. Yeah, but if we're going to have a discussion about something, and I just use that as an example, the first thing I ask, rather than having a discussion about the pro-life issue, people will say, oh, well, I suppose you're pro-life then. And I just say, well, I believe that life begins at conception. So beyond that, then we have a discussion about whether it's okay to terminate a life,
Hmm.
and for whatever reason it is. And there are perhaps reasons. I'm not suggesting they're not. But let's be honest from my perspective and from a scientific perspective, because they've detected a brainwave and heartbeat at 9 days. So most people have an abortion after 9 days. So let's just call it life, and it's not part of the mother. It's a separate life. Just saying it's
Yeah, it can have a different blood type than the mother.
well, the blood doesn't actually mix together with
That's
the
right.
baby.
That's why it can have a different blood type than the mother. So it's definitely a separate entity.
Exactly. It's a separate entity. So it's not just a woman's body. It's two bodies. So this is what I call being honest. I don't call this a discussion about pro-life, not pro-life. I call it, take a look at the science, see what you think, and even if it's difficult to grasp, at least have an
Yeah, I
opinion
think
about where life begins,
maybe
or
it might be good
yeah,
to start out with what someone's objective or agenda is, kind of with it. Like if if somebody's primary thing is want to be able to terminate pregnancy whenever they want to, then they're going to argue with you back at your other point about when does life begin. But I
right.
think it's important for them to know what their agenda is themselves.
And I guess that's what I'm saying about the being honest with ourselves thing, because that's where the argument comes. They're not arguing pro-life or not pro-life. I mean, most people wouldn't want, to kill a child. But if you depersonalize it and say it's not a child, it's just a piece of tissue, then you don't have to have that kind of discussion. The kind that makes you feel guilty or makes you have to think a little bit harder about what you're doing.
Yeah. Yep.
So
lots of different issues in it, but yeah, it comes down to honesty. So I like your challenge for the new year of
how many
seeing
days can we be honest? And it has, if I don't care what your resolutions are, losing weight or whatever, just be honest about how you go about, have integrity in terms of how you go about setting goals, talking to people, reading Dr. Judy's book.
and figuring out how to answer, does this dress make me look fat? And figure out your answer to that, how you'll or those types of things, so that you can respect them and yourself and still be honest. And
yes. And what would you say? Do I look fat? Tell me, Dr. Judy, do I look fat?
Do you want me to really tell you?
Yeah, it's going to be hard for you to tell because we don't have any.
Yeah, I haven't figured out a good answer to that because I don't have a spouse that wears a dress, So, but that type of issue is, I guess I'm so used to just bluntly giving an answer to whatever the question is that the people around me kind of know not to ask a question if they don't want the real answer.
Good. That's exactly how I feel too. What if people are asking you those kind of questions, then you need to start being more honest with them, because clearly you've been a little bit too
Well, maybe they want to know if the dress makes them look fat. Yeah, it kind of does. Okay, then they know to go find a different dress to wear.
Okay.
If they wanted to know that for sure, if I asked somebody that, I'd want to know if, what dress made me look less fat or whatever.
Absolutely.
Or is this more appropriate?
Absolutely. My partner, Tom, who died earlier this year, was amazing this way because he was so kind. He's just a wonderfully kind person. But things like, I went to a thrift shop and I got a sweater, and I was thinking about making a skirt out of it. That was a little trendy kind of thing that people were doing where they cut off part of the sweater, and it had a diagonal, or I don't know, what do you call it? Stripes that went across. And he said, I don't think that would be the best for you. And he said it before I even got the sweater. And
oh, that's nice.
It was so nice. I loved Tom. He wasn't mean about it. He just wanted me to know. And
yeah, and that's the way good friends should be, or all people should be. It's like if you ask the clerk in the store how the dress makes you look, you're not going to probably get the right answer.
That's right.
Well, except they might say, well, try this one and try this one. That's their honest way out of it, but they're still implying the answer.
At that moment, I felt just a little bit ticked off, but then I thought about it, because this is part of being honest. Why do I feel this way? Noticing how you feel and why you're doing things. And I thought, I wasn't mad at him. I was mad because I could stand to lose a few pounds. And that's a lot of work. And then I go, oh, I had 6 kids and they're not being very nice to me. And all this other stuff comes up, all these things like, why did I gain all this weight to have these kids?
One question,
that are so ungrateful.
One question represents, so much other baggage.
Precisely.
Or rationalizing.
So let's spend the new year thinking about what it is that's triggering us and making us want to lie.
And that's a wonderful story you had about the sweater with the stripe across it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your reaction to it. That was good.
Well, he was a good man, and he knew how to address things. And my mom was like that too. She was very honest, and I think you're right. If we could all be honest with one another, our world would be a lot better place. So,
And if it's, it works well in small towns. That's what I hate about global government type stuff. If it's
precisely.
a small town, governing, you sort of self-govern because you know who the one liar is in the neighborhood, and pretty soon they get shamed into telling the truth.
Well, that's exactly why the one world government is so okay. I won't use the word evil. That's how I feel about it, but that's why it's so insidious because it's doing exactly that. It's depersonalizing us. It's making us feel like we're just a number, and it's so much easier to control us when
Where
we're
do you get asylum?
yeah, yeah. Oh, where's our sanctuary city? Where's our safe space? We don't have any. We're
Well, so what that is some people can commit crimes and other people can't, and get away with it.
good
Yeah,
point. That
it's
is,
it's
you're always so observant.
I don't know. That's just kind of the way I see it. But it's yeah. Even with this safe space deal, it's schools and what do you call it? Rooms with Play-Doh in it and traumatized kids. I mean, that's what kind of a world are we going to have when they graduate from college?
Hmm. Well, this idea of taking offense, I think, is a lot of why what perpetuates the lying part, because how much of what we do isn't sincere anymore. We're just doing it so we don't get in trouble, so we don't have
Hmm.
to deal with the other person being upset. Uh, it's a lack of maturity, and going back to that sweater thing, I could have stomped around and been mad all day, and I have done that when I was a
Then
kid. But
need
there
your
comes
safe
a point,
space and
yeah, there comes a point where we have to take responsibility and say, there was a time when I could have worn that. Now I can't. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to live with it? Am I going to be happy with myself, or am I going to lose some weight? And that's taking responsibility instead of you made me feel really uncomfortable and I need my
right.
safe space.
Or to realize that you need to pick a different sweater, and then that would might make you look good.
Right. And he actually does love me because that's what he wants. He wants the best. And
Hmm.
so I just want to dedicate this on a serious note to Tom, who died in March. And I miss him dearly and missed him at Christmas. I didn't go anywhere because I just really missed Tom because last Christmas was so great. So this isn't meant to be a whiny end, it's meant to be a tribute to Tom and the impact that he had on so many people. He was an amazing guy. And you're an amazing lady, Dr. Judy Wood. And I'm so thankful that you've spent so much time talking to the audience this year. And we look forward to some more conversations in the new year. Do you have
Well, thanks.
any thoughts other than that?
Um, I'm glad that you can cope with my not like what do we call it? Hypothesizing answers. A lot of people like to, oh, what story do you have? About whatever. I mean, you can get in, you can do stories with the fun of it, but to make sure you make it a separation and a distinction between what you know and what you're speculating about, and because it's becoming more and more important with being psyopted.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest thing is know what it is that you know that you know that you know, and know everything else you don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
it would be nice to be able to know all sorts of stuff, but we don't have access to a lot of stuff like say you can say who walks into the lead line meat locker, but you don't know what happens when they go in there, what they talk about or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
You can only speculate, and then that doesn't do anything. It's fun to speculate,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that helps you know where to look, but you still have to find evidence to know something for sure, because maybe you're being tricked into making assumptions. I mean, that's how magicians work. They trick you into making the wrong assumptions. They don't lie to
Mm-hmm.
you. They get you to lie to yourself. And by you believe something that's not true, so you end up trying to solve the wrong problem. And that's a very powerful tool that's used by media and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And so this I find very little usefulness in what network media does. they're trying to coerce the viewership into something, into coming back for more, maybe, because they can sell more advertising dollars, or but whoever is controlling them will control the message.
Well, that's what I like about the internet and this particular format. It's, we're not making anything on this. We're just doing it because we care. And maybe we have different reasons for doing it. But I know that at the bottom line of this, all of this, everything you've done, and I'm hoping everything that I do is out of a sense of wanting to help our fellow human beings. And
exactly.
So I just wish everybody a really happy new year, and we will see you next year. And meanwhile, you can listen to my new what do I call it? It's an extra this time because it was an intro when we came into the show. So I'm going to just play it and say goodbye to you. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Political correctness. And political correctness is the oppression of our intellectual movement, so no one says anything anymore in case somebody else gets offended.
Yeah.